Chapter 19. Grounded. Jail, thought Daniel. Jail would have been easy. At least in jail they don't give lectures. At least in jail you don't have to see the disappointment on your parents' faces. Sure, you might stare at bars all day, and your cellmate might be named Mad Dog, but all that seemed like a pleasant alternative to Daniel. At least in jail he could hide from all the trouble he'd caused. As it turned out, Eric's mother wasn't really a deep sleeper after all, and when a helpful neighbor called to tell her that some people were trying to break into her basement, she woke up in a hurry. The police were quick to arrive, and she'd even offered the handsome young deputies cookies before they hauled the two juvenile delinquents off in the squad car. As for Mollie, she had disappeared, and Daniel had a sinking suspicion as to where. Daniel's mother didn't say much to him when the officers brought him home, his little brush with the law being just one more thing to deal with. This made Daniel feel worse than any punishment would have. With all the grief she was feeling right now, she shouldn't have to worry about him as well. She sent him to his room and said that they would deal with all this when his father got home, which was typical of the justice system around the Corrigan household. Wait till your father gets home was an old familiar refrain. In his bedroom, Daniel found a box of Graham's belongings that his mother had left for him. The last thing Daniel wanted to do right now was to go through a box of painful memories, but his mother wanted him to choose a few keepsakes, and considering the amount of trouble he was already in, he thought it wise not to push his luck. As the day gave way to night, Daniel opened one of Graham's old scrapbooks. While he idly flipped the pages, dark thoughts took over, and he found himself wondering if Rowan or Mollie would be receiving a visit from the Shroud tonight. Or would it visit Daniel instead? What would Eric do to him, now that there was no more need for secrecy? Daniel came across a page of old newspaper clippings, yellowed with age. The headline of one in particular caught his attention. Meteor shower expected to follow recent comet sightings. Families plan comet watching parties. Dated October 12th, 1934. It was practically ancient. Next to the article was a child's drawing. Its colors were faded, and the paper was wrinkled and torn. But Daniel could still make out the picture clearly enough. A girl, standing next to a building on fire, stars falling out of the sky around her. It was not the drawing of a happy child. There was a knock on his bedroom door. "Daniel," said his father, opening the door. He hadn't waited for an invitation. His father wasn't alone. There was a thick-necked police officer with him. Neither of them looked at all pleased. "Daniel, this is Sheriff Simmons, and he'd like to talk with you, son." The tone of his father's voice set Daniel immediately on edge. He had expected his father to be serious, but there was something more going on here. There was something new in his father's eyes. Was it fear? "Hello, Daniel," said Sheriff Simmons. "You mind if I sit?" Daniel gestured to the desk chair, and the officer lowered himself gingerly into the seat. Sheriff Simmons was not a small man, and the chair protested under his weight. Daniel's father remained standing in the doorway. "So, I hear you had a little run-in today with a couple of my deputies." Daniel nodded. "I hope they didn't scare you too much, but you know you can't be going into people's homes without their permission, even the homes of friends. You understand that, right?" Daniel nodded again. "Answer the man, Daniel," said his father. Yes, sir." "You also understand that we'd be curious as to why you do a thing like that. Why you'd go into your friend's room when he wasn't there?" "I told your deputies we were going to surprise Eric when he got home. We were just fooling around is all." Daniel saw the sheriff glance over to Daniel's father and noticed the deep lines of worry creasing his father's brow. Daniel's mouth had gone dry. What's going on?" "Well, that's the thing, isn't it?" said Sheriff Simmons. "We were hoping that you might be able to answer the question for us. You see, your friend Eric didn't show up for dinner this evening, and well, after what went on this afternoon, his mother is understandably concerned. He probably just lost track of time. I haven't seen him, though." "Uh-huh," said Sheriff Simmons. "And how about your friend, Mollie Lee? That was her bike that we found in the drive with you two, wasn't it?" "Mollie? She's gone missing, too. She missed her afternoon piano lesson, and her friends expected her to be home hours ago. Any idea where she might be?" "No." "Maybe she's with your friend Eric? That possible?" "I guess it's possible." "Enough, Daniel!" snapped his father. Daniel had rarely heard his father raise his voice, but now his face was red with anger. "This is not a game. Those parents are worried sick, and if you know anything about what's going on, you better tell us right now." "I don't know where they are," Daniel replied. "I don't." Sheriff Simmons gave Daniel a hard, long look. "You know what, Daniel? I believe you. But I also believe that you're not saying everything there is to say. I'm on my way to Rowan Palmer's house next, said the sheriff, standing. But don't be surprised if I stop back for another visit before the night is through. His father looked meaningfully at Daniel as he shut the door and said, We'll talk later. Until then, you are not to leave this room. And just like that, he was alone again. Eric was missing. Mollie was missing. The police were searching for both of them, and apparently he and Rowan were prime suspects. Well, he doubted they were actual suspects, but the police could tell that they were hiding something. Were they ever? Well, Mr. Sheriff, actually Mollie could be anywhere since she can fly, and Eric doubles as a power-stealing supervillain, so the chances is that if you find her, he won't be far off. Glad I could help. It was all just happening too fast. He wanted to be doing something, to be helping Mollie, or trying to stop Eric. But the problem was, he couldn't leave his room. Not only that, but he didn't really know where Mollie was, or if she even was in danger. For all he knew, she might just be flying above their heads, letting off steam. Something else was bothering him, too. Something that he had been thinking about just before the interruption. He had been looking at Graham's old scrapbook when a photo in there caught his eye. Daniel picked up the hefty book again and hauled it over to his desk. Under the light of the desk lamp, he could just make out enough detail in the rest of the faded old clippings to make reading them worthwhile. The book was oversized and a little unwieldy, with a cracked binding and dusty cellophane sheets protecting every page. As he thumbed through, Daniel's attention was drawn to a photo of what could only have been Graham as a little girl. She was wearing her Sunday best, standing between a kindly-looking couple. There was a certificate attached to it, brown and faded with age. It read, The great state of Pennsylvania hereby acknowledges the adoption of Elaine Stewart, age 10, by Mr. and Mrs. Herbert Lewis. Graham was adopted? This was a startling fact, one that Daniel was shocked he hadn't known before. But even more shocking was the newspaper clipping next to it. The article was dated October 14th, 1934, just a few days after the strange comet he had seen in the skies over Noble's Green. The headline read, Local Trapper Leads Miraculous Survivors of St. Albans Fire to Safety. There was a photo accompanying the article, a photograph that Daniel had seen before, hanging in the wall of the Mount Noble Observatory. Though the photograph was hazy and newsprint dim with age, Daniel could still pick out the haunted eyes of the orphans of St. Albans, 9 children, with their faces covered in soot. Standing in the middle was the trapper, Jonathan Noble. Daniel tried to study Johnny's picture in detail, but the photo was too old to glean much. This Johnny was bearded, and even dirtier than the children he'd rescued. Still, there was something familiar about him. The tilt of his head. Below the picture was a caption, which Daniel read with interest. It was a listing of all the surviving orphans. Daniel used his finger to scan the names, squinting to read each faded letter. There she was, standing just to the right of Jonathan Noble, little Elaine Stewart. It was remarkable to think that Graham had been an orphan, but to know that she survived the St. Albans fire was almost too much to take in. Daniel supposed he could understand why she wouldn't talk about that period of her life, but he still felt a little hurt that he hadn't known until now. Daniel was just about to turn the page when something in the face of one of the other children made him pause. It was a little boy, smaller and scrawnier than the rest. His eyes stared at the camera with an intensity that Daniel found alarming. Whereas the other children looked mostly exhausted and frightened, this little boy wore a strange, angry scowl. Daniel went back to the list of names. Will Naughton, May Lee, Herman... No, whispered Daniel. No. But it was. Daniel knew those eyes. He knew that look. Herman Plunkett, age 9. He was looking up from the page and scowling at him. He was reaching across time to scowl at the foolish, gullible boy who fancied himself a detective. Just then, something moved outside his open window. The blind stirred in the breeze before exploding. Daniel just managed to duck out of the way as a shape came hurtling through the window. Pieces of plastic flew everywhere as the blinds came tearing down on Daniel's head. The shroud! But it wasn't the shroud. It was a girl. A girl who landed on his bed. It was covered in scratches and cuts. Her normally dirty clothes were even more filthy and torn. Mollie! Hey, she whispered weakly. New kid. She looked as if she'd just flown through a wall. You're hurt, he said. I'll get my dad. No, I'm fine. I just need to catch my breath. Daniel started to go anyway, but she grabbed hold of his wrist and wouldn't let go. You were wrong, Daniel, she said between breaths. About Eric. You were wrong. Mollie, what happened? He asked, coming back to her side. Now that he got a good look at her, she didn't appear to be seriously hurt. She was, however, a mess. Mollie was talking, but Daniel couldn't understand what she was saying. She was in hyper mode, and her mouth moved so fast that it was little more than a blur to Daniel's eyes. Mollie, slow down. I can't understand you. Here, drink this. He handed her a bottle from the bedside table. It'll help. Mollie took it and sucked down its contents gratefully. Ugh, she sputtered, catching her breath. I hate apple juice. Yeah, well, it's wet, Mollie. Slowly now, what's going on? She sat upright and rubbed at the dirt and grit in her eyes. She was already seemed to be more herself, but Daniel noticed that she was keeping a wary eye on the window. I was with Eric. I kind of figured. I know, Daniel, but I needed to see him. I needed to hear the truth from him. Daniel started to scold her, but he almost opened his mouth to tell her how incredibly stupid she was, how she'd put herself in danger and caused everyone a lot of worry. But then he saw the look in her eyes. For the first time he wondered, were Mollie's feelings toward Eric more than friendly? He knew that Eric was important to her, but now he began to wonder just how important. Go on, Daniel said. Well, I found him there, at the fort, and I told him everything. I hadn't planned to. I'd planned on weaseling the truth out of him, like they do in the movies. But once I started talking, it all just kind of burst. I told him about Simon, about the quarry, about Plunkett, and of course about the comics you found in his room. And what'd he say? He denied everything. I honestly didn't know what to believe, because, Daniel, you should have seen the look in his face. It was like I'd hurt him. Real bad. Mollie sank back into Daniel's bed now, and when she next spoke, her voice was softer. Then he kind of went crazy. I think he kept on going on and on about the real Johnny Noble and how he would know what to do. Then he just left. He flew off without a word. And you followed him? Well, duh. I wanted to see where he was going, even though by that point I had a pretty good idea. The quarry? Yeah, he got there just as the sun was going down. Just one of these days, I'd like to see that place in broad daylight. I bet it's not half as scary then. I was behind him. I stayed far enough back that he couldn't see, and I watched as he went into that tunnel. And what? The shroud was waiting for us. I was hiding near the entrance when all of a sudden it was there, on top of me. I couldn't breathe. The shroud? Well, you said Eric went into the tunnel. That's my point, Daniel. We were wrong about him. We were so wrong. Okay, but if the shroud caught you, how did you get away? Eric! It was Eric. He came out of the tunnel like a thunderbolt and started fighting. Daniel, he was really fighting. I've never seen anything like it. They tore up the whole quarry. Rocks and dirt were flying everywhere. I thought that Eric was going to win. I really did, but the shroud was just too strong. Then the shroud saw me, and I flew away. I left Eric there, and I escaped, like a coward. But Eric is still alive. He was unconscious when I left, but he was still alive. We have to go. We have to help him. Daniel took a deep breath. He stood up and went over to the desk, where Graham's scrapbook was lying open. The picture of little Herman Plunkett stared back at him from the faded photograph. You're not a coward, Mollie. You couldn't beat him alone. The shroud wanted you to see that Eric was still alive. He wanted you to go get help. He's taunting us. Without Eric, we have no chance of beating him. But he knows that we'll try. He's using Eric as bait so that he can end it all tonight. Daniel, said Mollie, if Eric's not the shroud, then the photo Plunkett gave you was a fake. It was a lie, just like everything else he's been telling me, and I fell for it all. It's Plunkett. He's the shroud, and he has been all along. Daniel looked at the window, at the stars emerging in the early night sky. His parents would be coming up here to check on him any minute now. The entire Nobles Green Sheriff Department was out searching for Eric while he was caught in a life-and-death struggle with a true villain, a twisted old man who'd manipulated Daniel and preyed upon the children of Nobles Green for who knew how many years. Come on, Daniel said, stepping up to the window. Are you strong enough to walk? Mollie nodded, but her eyes were worried. Are we going to the quarry? Yes, we'll pick up Rowan and the others along the way. Plunkett wants a fight? Then he'll get one. What do we do when we get there? You said yourself that we're not strong enough to beat the shroud. No, but I know someone who is, Daniel said, his jaw tight with determination. A plan forming in his head. An outrageous plan that only a fool would try. So, he said, a smile forming on his lips. Feel like taking a trip to the junkyard? Okay, guys, I added starting to add sound effects, some music in the background. Please tell me what you think, if you like it or not. I just want to hear your opinion on it. Thank you.